Welcome to Feeling Asian, a podcast where two Asians talk about their feelings. I'm Youngmi Mayer.
And I'm Brian Park.
And we have if you're watching on YouTube, you can probably see our guest who is not Asian, and I guess that's going to be a surprise reveal for the listeners later. But before we reveal our first ever non-Asian guest, we're going to do our Patreon shout outs.
Yeah, so listeners, if you like the podcast, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/feelingasian. You know the drill. Check it out. See the exclusive benefits that Youngmi and I offer. But any donation amount gets you a shout out on the podcast where we guess who you are based on your name alone. And without further ado, Youngmi, are you ready for our first shout out?
Yes, I'm very ready.
Our first shout out for this episode goes out to one name, Haley.
Haley. Is it Haley Bieber?
Haley with two Y's. So Hayley.
Oh, I thought you meant like at the end there were two Y's, like E. And I was like, wow, this person's name is like the thirsty message on Tinder where you're like, Haley. You know, that's like when I'm just trying to fuck. Like my message on Tinder is always like, hey, and there's like 3 or 4 Y's, and you know I'm ready.
Yeah. Oh my God. I learned recently that when I text, I text differently from the way I speak, but I'm very proper in writing, like whether it's email or in text. So I never extend consonants like you do, Youngmi. And I've gotten that feedback a lot from people that I'm dating. They're like, do you even like me? Like, you're really cold and aloof. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. That's just how I text. And I think it's because I'm not doing the, hey, bye, so fun.
You got to add the I's. You got to add multiple I's at the end.
You got to add the extra consonants.
Did you see that meme where it was like 1 just means like, I'm your friend. 3 means I want to have sex. 8 means like I'm mentally ill or something. I'm like, I'm at the mentally ill level. Okay, so Haley. Hi, Haley with 2 Y's, but not at the end.
Haley is really athletic, I feel.
Yes.
That's a sporty girl name.
Yep.
Like soccer captain.
I'm getting young vibes, like this person's in high school.
Right. So she is the captain of the field hockey team. Cries when they lose. Yes. And everyone gets very scared.
Definitely. Or, you know, like at the bottom hour or whatever, she has like that inspirational little monologue. Like, we got to do this, man. Next year, we're all going to college. We'll never see each other again. We got to do it for the Gators. Like that.
Youngmi, I'm not too familiar with field hockey. Can you please elaborate on what is the bottom hour?
I don't know. I meant like the last 10 minutes. I don't know. Like you got 5 minutes on the clock. You're down 1, whatever, goal, point. I don't know.
The bottom hour occurs in between the hours of 11 p.m. and 3 in the morning.
Yes,
Friday
the bottoms
night.
Hour. We all know. Our guest knows all about the bottom hour.
Haley, thank you for supporting us on the pod. Our next shout out goes out to Samu E.
SAMU?
SAMWOO E.
Oh, Samu. I'm getting a very strong age. I feel like this person is older, like 38.
46.
40s, yeah, which is my age. By older,
38.
By older, I mean me. But I'm seeing like a very full head of hair. Right? I'm getting strong, full head of hair vibes.
Samu E. Are you thinking like long and scraggly hair? Like an artist?
No, like it looks like Brian's hair, I feel like.
Oh, okay. So someone who is in arrested development and can't act their own age.
I said your hair, not your personality.
I think the hair is an extension of personality. I think that's why because white people, they bald very quickly and they very easily become, look like they're 40. You know, those like 25-year-old white guys who just tuck in their shirt all the time. And no one asked you to do this, but they do it anyways.
No one asked you to do this.
No one asked you to tuck in your t-shirt into your chino pants with Sperry's, but you do it. It's a choice.
That is always so shocking to me when somebody dresses like that and they're young.
I used to dress like that.
Yeah.
I love all the commentary. Yes, I think that this person is maybe 38. They have a full head of hair. They are successful. I feel like very lawful, put together vibes.
I was gonna say lawyer with one kid.
Like that.
Yeah.
Definitely. Dad vibes.
Samu, thank you for your philanthropic contribution. Our last shout out for this episode goes out to Aurora Helen Drucker Michaels.
Okay, I know somebody named Aurora, and maybe she got married, but I don't think this is her, because I don't think she would use a married name.
Aurora Helen Drucker Michaels. Now, Aurora, I know that you are not this person, but if someone told me that the name of the white woman who is trying to elevate the kanji experience was named Aurora Helen Drucker Michaels, I would say, oh shit, that makes sense.
Elevate the kanji experience. No, her name was actually Karen. Literally Karen.
It's literally Karen.
No,
wow.
I feel like Aurora. I feel like it's like, you remember you were talking about this last episode when you have like a cool name, you just become like a cool artsy person. I feel like Aurora is such an artsy, cool name that this person lives up to it.
I'm going to guess she is an art therapist.
I feel like that's on the money. And the last name, I feel like whenever you see like a therapist, their last name is like so interesting and unique too.
Yeah.
I'm getting big time art therapist vibes.
Aurora's out here doing the work, not elevating the kanji experience because she is being respectful.
Or do you think she's like in Parasite, like that con artist woman? Remember she pretended she was an art therapist in the movie Parasite? She just kind of like BS'd her way into this rich person's life. She was like, hey, he's angry.
Aurora, keep doing you. Thank you for supporting the pod. And for everyone else out there, if you would like to do so, go to our Patreon at patreon.com/feelingasian. Now, I think it's time for our wonderful introduction because this is a very special, momentous occasion in our podcast history, Youngmi.
Yes. Do you want me to introduce our guest? Because this person is a very close and dear friend of mine.
I think it would be disrespectful if you did not introduce our wonderful guest. It's on you this time.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce our amazing guest. This is a very dear friend of mine, the first ever non-Asian guest on Feeling Asian at my insistence. Also, head of the Restaurant Workers Community Foundation.
Board president, we have an executive director, so.
Yes. Also an amazing and very well-known mixologist, cocktail mixologist, and author of the amazing cocktail book, Drink What You Want. John deBary.
Hi. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited that you're here. John, have you hung out with Brian before?
No, never.
Really?
We've never hung out. However,
I was trying to think. Yeah.
I feel like I've gotten a sample of the experience because Youngmi gifted me Proto, which is
amazing.
Yeah, which is your non-alcoholic
wine.
It's not a wine substitute, but it is a non-alcoholic drink. And as someone who doesn't drink, I really enjoyed it and appreciated it because I
was hoping it would make its way to you because that's like our first friend date when we had lunch at Kiki's. I gave you bottles.
Oh, yeah. And Brian doesn't drink. I forgot the other thing. You do so much, John, that I forgot. Also, the owner of the company Proto, which is a non-alcoholic beverage substance. It's like an adult
botanical
drink.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
It's so good.
And Brian drinks it because Brian doesn't drink. The first time John gave it to me, I put gin in it, and I was like, "This is great! I love this."
It's good with gin, yeah. Honestly.
Anyway, we're so excited that you're here. I'm sad. I'm like sad that you and Brian haven't hung out. I feel like we would all get along, but I'm sure it's gonna happen
in due time.
But
manifesting.
But this is a historic moment because John, you are our first non-Asian guest on Feeling Asian podcast.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does it feel?
It's like kind of like a dream come true because I like started listening to the podcast before we were friends, but I was like friend stalking you and I'm like, I'll get like good material so when we hang out, you can like talk about stuff. So I like started listening to your podcast, like the early episodes, and I was like, oh, they're so cool.
Oh.
Now here we are.
Thanks, John.
Here we are.
He started out as a fan, and now he is a guest. Listeners, dream big.
One day.
I guess so. Before we get to you, John, I'm going to ask Brian. Brian, how are you feeling?
Okay, so I am currently at my parents' house in Texas, visiting family. And so I flew in late last night, and mixed feelings. I'll start with the positive. So, we recently just announced our Feeling Asian live show, and it sold out like super quickly, which is so fucking awesome and really exciting. For the people who couldn't get a ticket, that's on us. I don't know. This is crazy. We didn't anticipate
we
to
did
sell
not
out so
expect
quickly.
it to sell out so quickly.
But there will be future shows. We're turning this into a monthly. But I don't know. Like driving on the highway back home from the airport and kind of just, I always get nostalgic when I return to my like childhood roots, and obviously, but I felt really proud in that like moment. I don't know if it was because really late at night and I was just remembering like a lot of the things I used to do here in El Paso, and it's really cool what we've done, Youngmi. Like I don't know, just like growing up in this random city in Texas, and then knowing that I have this life in New York where we do comedy, and then we just sold out our show. Like that's so much growth and so much like progress that we've made in this game called, I'm being like so corny right now, but I don't know. I think in the backdrop of where I grew up, I'm like, damn, I've made it far. Like I'm really proud that we've established ourselves in New York, and it's cool. It's really exciting. And so I'm really proud that just in general, like for all the progress that we've made and for the life that I've sort of made for myself in New York, like doing comedy. And then I'm also a bit sad because part of the reason why I'm here in town is to visit a relative, and she has Alzheimer's, and I spoke to her over the phone. I knew like that it had progressed, but seeing it in person, it was it's difficult. Yeah. I'm seeing another side of my parents too, like seeing them interact with her, and it's just sad, and it's just a fucking terrible and horrible disease, but I'm trying to stay optimistic because she still has some of her mental faculties left, and I just want to maximize the time that we have together in the present. But it's really hard. It's challenging. So that's what's going on with me. Mixed feelings, good and bad.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that, Brian. Sounds
hard. It's okay. I mean, it's just a fucking debilitating disease, you know? You're like, they're physically healthy, but at times it feels like you're interacting with a third grader, and you just wish you could like reverse it and shake them, like be like, come on, I know you're there, you know?
I think that last thing you said is very like poignant, and it's kind of like when things that are really sad happen, that's like the hardest part for me. It's like like if somebody passes away or somebody gets like very ill or something, it just seems like because it was not like that like a short time ago, you're just like, can we just like go back, and like that like feel that stiff feeling of
trauma.
Yeah, like we can't go back in time. Obviously we can't, but like it just seems so like it in reach or something.
Right.
So,
and
like, I understand. Yeah,
and on top of all of it, I'm just feel like older, I guess. Just time passes so quickly, you know?
It
like
does,
there's relatives that I have fond memories of when I was a child, and seeing them get older, and but then I'm spending time with my nieces and nephews, and every time I see them, they're like they've just grown exponentially. And so I'm sort of slotted in the middle of all that. And I'm like, damn, I'm getting older. Like, it's not, I'm not making a judgment on it, but it's just, it's something that I recognize. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that way too. But then I also feel like because I see these people in my life, my family that are older, and then I see, you know, like my son that's like younger, the other generation. I'm very like aware of the fact that I am in prime adulthood, and this is the best. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't spend a lot of time feeling like I'm too old, because I feel like a lot of people that are 36 might feel that way, but the reality is like this is solid youthful adulthood. You know, I still look great and like my body works, and I hate it when I hear my friends that are my age and they're like, it hurts when I wake up in the morning. I'm like, no it doesn't. What are you talking about? We're still young as shit. Like, come on, you're gonna regret this when you're 55 and you were talking shit about this. You know what I mean? Like,
but yeah, that's what's going on with me, young me.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling like the last few weeks, I don't know how into astrology people are, but I'm like really into astrology, and like Cancer season, as soon as it hit, I noticed that I'm like very sensitive emotionally, and I'm like picking fights with everybody. Everyone's fucking getting on my nerves, and I'm like very like self-righteous about everything. And most of the time I'm wrong. And so then I have to apologize, you know, like I'm like, fuck you, you did this. And then they're like, no, I didn't. I'm like, I was wrong. I'm sorry. And then I'm crying. And that there's been a lot of that going on, just like in all my relationships, my friends, just little weird fights. But something did happen, and I wanted to bring it up because it's like this thing. It's like we're quote unquote post pandemic, and we had all this like racial stuff happening during that, and you know there's awareness like anti-Asian hate, but you know I'm reminded on not a daily basis, but on a regular basis that it's like we're very far away from like getting to where we would all want to be, you know? And so something happened in Mino's school. There was like a teacher who was white, and they were very like hard on Mino since day one. Like every time we would pick Mino up, the teacher would be like, Mino did this, and this, like, and have like serious discussions. Like, for example, there was one time where Mino pushed a kid too hard during freeze tag, and they had to have a very long discussion with us about it. And I was like, no, I get it. Like, he's bigger. He's like a head taller than all the other kids. Yeah. And it's even though that he's doing the same thing that they're doing to him, he has to take in account that he's larger, and do you know what I mean? So like he has to be aware that he's stronger, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then we had a bunch of, it happened like 3 times where they pulled us aside and talked to us about it. But then the other day, Mino, like right before bed, he was like, oh, because I noticed there's this day I made him chapaghetti, which is like black bean noodles. And I had noticed that he didn't eat it. And so right before bed, I was just like, hey, you didn't eat your lunch. And he started crying, and he said that the kids called it worms.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, shit, not this again. You know, this classic Asian American story. And it was so interesting because I posted his lunch on Instagram, and I got a bunch of messages from people being like, yum, like, what is that? Somebody was like, what's the recipe? Chapaghetti like comes in, it's like an instant thing. Like you just put water. You just put water in it. Somebody was like, what's the recipe? And I was like, haha. And so a bunch of people were like, that looks amazing. Like, what a cute lunch. And then this jarring like juxtaposition of all these people being supportive, and then realizing my son was getting made fun of it in school, like it's 1975 again, you know. And then he started crying, and so then I was like, did you tell your teachers? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, why didn't they tell me? Like, he went through the whole day without eating from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Like, you think that that's something. And then I started getting upset because I was like, well, why do they take so much time about him being too rough during freeze tag or whatever? And then this is actually a huge, I feel like a way bigger deal, because in their handbook, the first page, it says no bullying based on like, no like mocking other people's cultures or whatever. It's like stated in bold because that's like after 2020 Everyone
Right.
has to be like, Black Lives Matter, blah, 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 you know?
Right,
but then
right.
when it actually comes to it in practice, no one gave a fuck. And so I was getting all fucking riled up. But then I was like,
Yeah.
I don't even know if the teachers knew, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. So I emailed the director of the school, and I said exactly that. Like, this is what happened. I've noticed the teachers particularly pick on him. I didn't say pick on him, but like they're paying a lot of attention to his bad quote unquote behavior. But I was like, this is a much bigger issue. And no one talked to me about it. But I was like, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe the teachers didn't know.
Yeah.
Nobody replied to my email. So the next day I show up. And I get there, and I still don't know if the teacher knows or not. So I see them, and I say, hey, did you know this happened to Mino? And they're like, oh, yeah, we like talked about it. And I was like, okay, why didn't you tell me? And they were like, oh, well, you know, I just didn't think, you know, blah, blah. So I was like, did you talk to the parents of that child that did that to him? And the teacher was like, no. And I just want to say right now that child was white. And I was like, why didn't you tell that child's parents that they did that to my son? I actually don't know if he's white. I'm pretty sure he's white. I was like, and the name sounds white, but he might not be, but he's obviously not Asian. And so then I was like, why didn't you? Because I was like, but you always pull me aside whenever Mino's done anything. So why didn't you pull that child's parents aside? And then they were like, you know what? I'm going to get my superior, the person that's like one step above them.
Right.
And I just want to, I know I got a little heated right now, but I just want to point out that when I was talking to the teacher, I was very calm. I was just like, oh, so like, this was my tone of voice. Obviously in person, I'm a lot softer. I was like, oh, like, well, like the problem that I have with that is that like you talk to me a lot about me. Like that's the tone of voice I had.
Right.
Okay, so then the teacher goes to get the other person. The other person that's their superior is a black woman. And when they walked off, the teacher who was white started crying.
Oh God.
And I was looking at this and I was just like, this is so fucked up, dude. Like I was just having a conversation with you. I was not, everyone saw me. Like I was talking like this. I was just talking to her like this.
Right.
And then her superior, who's a black woman, walked toward me and she was like, hey, and I was like, just before I say anything, I did not raise my voice at the teacher. I'm sorry she's crying, but I literally was just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And
you're being very civil and
I was being very civil.
Yeah.
And I guess her title was manager or something like that, director or something. The supervisor. The supervisor was like, yeah, no, she was like, no, I totally get it. Like, you don't have to tell me. I know what's going on. And she was like, oh, I'm sorry. And then I told her, I was just like, you know, I don't have obviously kids say things that are mean like that. And to be honest, Mino will probably and has said things like that to other kids. Like, that's just kids. They just don't know. And I don't think anything of that kid or that kid's family, because sometimes Mino said weird stuff like about like race, and I'm just like, what? And then I don't want people thinking that was like something he got from me, you know. But I was just like, you know, the only problem I have is that there's been like special attention placed on Mino when he does something bad, and it's not being reciprocated to other children. That's the only problem I have.
Right.
Anyway.
God, that's so frustrating for you, Youngmi. Like,
I know.
Because even, you know, just hearing all of this, you want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Let's say at your school, there's no like racial biases occurring.
Yeah.
It should go equal both ways. Like if Mino is playing roughhouse a little too hard and it's a little too mean, then yes, like they should report it to you and be like, hey, Mino's a little mean on the playground. He pushed a little too hard. But then if he's on the receiving end of it, where if a kid who in this instance like bullied him and it was racially motivated because he was making fun of his like his foreign food and saying that it looks like worms, that parent should be spoken to, because as a byproduct of that bullying, Mino went a day without eating. And if your kid isn't eating all day, as a parent, you should absolutely know that, you know?
Exactly. And then I was like almost standing there like, this is like such a trope that I'm like,
and like the white teacher
crying
after the
why are you crying? What the hell are you crying about? Like, you can just be like, you know what? Like, I've done, again, I feel like I always have to say shit like this, like, to calm white people down. I've done fucked up shit that's, like, culturally insensitive and racist and without knowing, obviously. And then I'm like, oh, my God. You know, I've done, like, homophobic shit. I've said homophobic shit. And somebody will call me out and I'll be like, fuck, dude, I suck. I'm sorry. That's fucked up. I'm going to think about it. But I'm not like, everyone's being mean to me. You're like, shut the fuck up, bro. But I think I was like, this is such a trope. Like, oh, we call out a white person for being racist, and they cry. And then I saw her supervisor comforting her, and I was just like, oh, there's a black woman comforting you right now because you were being racist. Like, this is too much for me to like. Come on, sis, pull it together here. I get it. I get it. It's, you know, it's like, it's scary when somebody confronts you. I understand that, but and I'm not judging anyone for their emotions. You know, I've been in many situations where I didn't want to cry and I started crying and it's embarrassing. But I was just like, this is so almost funny. Anyway, but I have to say one last thing. I'm sorry, this is taking so long, but like one last thing is that, so the emails that I sent were to the director, right? Who is above the supervisor and who is also a white woman. She never responded to my emails. She made the supervisor, the one like woman of color in this whole scenario, email me back. And that's when I was like, that's messed up, because it's like, okay, I get it. Like, okay, the supervisor is talking to me because she's over the teacher. But then I was like, the person replying to my email should be the director. But and she didn't reply. And I was like, okay, you're making the one person of color do all this emotional labor for you? Not fair. That's all I have to say. How about you, John? How are you feeling?
Well, I'm like in the moment right now, I'm like a little bit more nervous than I thought I was going to be. I usually get like really bad like stage fright. Like I'm going to go on like either it's like a podcast or like whatever, like give a talk or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm like trying to spin it as excitement. So there's that. But like, I think in a general sense, like I'm really good actually. Like I had like a mental health nadir, like in the last half of like June, I was like coming off, I was like tapered off my like Wellbutrin, which I had been on for a few years. And it was like really rough. And I also feel like we're in this like really messed up, like dual reality of like, oh, everything's back to normal, like you said, like quote unquote post pandemic, and everything's supposed to be back to normal, and like all the things that we thought that we were going to be able to do back in like March of 2020, like, oh, when things are back to normal, like everything's just going to be fine, and now it's like back to normal, but shit's still terrible, and it's like we're supposed to be okay with that, and it's super confusing, and I was like having a really hard time with it for a long time, and I feel like I just either got used to it, or maybe shit's like more fucked up now, so it's like back to being fucked up, and so we're in this crisis mode again. So maybe that's what's going on.
Do you think that had something to do? Because I remember, you know, like I said, John, you're my close friend, so you had this very intense, like emotional.
Yeah, I was like super depressed, like really, really. And I don't have depression like as a clinical diagnosis, but I was like really depressed for like 2 weeks.
Do you think that had something to do with like what you just said, like the whole abstract idea that we're all supposed to act normal, but it's not normal? Like,
oh, everything's fucked up, and as soon as the pandemic is over, whatever, and you get vaccinated and like restrictions lift, then like just magically overnight, like Wizard of Oz turning color, everything's supposed to be fine again.
Yeah.
So you're one of the co-founders of the Restaurant Workers Community Foundation, is that correct? How does this sort of public sentiment surrounding COVID, I know it impacts restaurant workers and like really fucks them over, because like the cities, like they're not transparent, and as restaurant like people, they're sort of just the last people to find out like what these guidelines are, and like you're kind of like, I feel like there's a lot of whiplash happening. And like, how are you feeling right now in regards to like all of this and the industry that you work in?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not like an active restaurant worker anymore. So, you know, I'm not really on like the quote, like front lines, but, you know, obviously interacting with people who are, and, you know, hearing from all kinds of different people. And, you know, the reason why I got together with a bunch of people to start this foundation. Like this is something that we came up with in like 2016. This was like basically like a Trump election, like spasm of like just despair.
Right.
Spasm of despair. That's how everyone felt after.
Yeah, like I legit couldn't get out of bed or even move for like days. It was bad. It was really bad. Yeah. That's when I found out I was mentally ill. But like, one of the things when I came out of it, I'm like, shit's gonna be so bad for so many people, and like the restaurant industry has treated me really well, and there are, like I was good at my job and I tried hard and I worked hard or whatever, but also it's like, as like a tall, okay looking white guy, you can just waltz into a lot of spaces and people are like, great, like I totally trust you, I believe you, like your expertise is unquestionable. And I saw that not happening for a lot of people, and I was like, okay, well, on a good day, like back, Obama or whatever, like before like the dark ages, like things were still really bad for restaurant workers. Like people were like on the on thin ice. Like on a good day, like you have a bad, like you get sick or like you have a bad day of tips or whatever, and it's like you could lose your house. Like things were not great. So back in 2016, we were like, things are going to get worse before they get better. So let's try to like band together and like sort of accumulate and aggregate what strength there is in the restaurant industry and people who have money and have power, and help redistribute that towards people who don't have any. And so we started the foundation using a model called the community foundation, which basically means that we like raise money and give money away. Whereas like a lot of places just raise money, or a lot of places just have a lot of money and then give it away. Like we do both. And it's kind of a way of like almost acting like a money manager, like a hedge fund in a little bit. If you think about that structure, where it's like the value add is our expertise in how to deploy money strategically. So that was kind of how we approached it, and wanted to do grants and impact investing and just like our own advocacy work, to like make people understand that restaurant workers were like kind of like a segment of our society that is like very overlooked, but very large.
Very large.
There's like 15 million or so people, I think this was before the pandemic, were in the restaurant industry. Like
Is it like the biggest
it's
employer,
a huge employer.
in America or something?
Yeah.
Whoa. Yeah.
Like there's more
It's huge.
people who work in the restaurant industry in New York City than work in the entire aviation industry.
Wow. I had no idea.
It's wild.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
And think about how much bailouts like fucking Delta got. You know what I mean? Like, so that's just the way that we prioritize like who gets what. And so we kind of wanted to change that. And so for a couple of years we were doing really good work, but it was really small and we were trying to raise money and people were kind of like, okay, like that's a nice idea, but like you haven't done much yet. Like there wasn't really a sense of urgency. And then when the pandemic hit, like we actually got a lot of people who were like, hey, like what are you guys going to do anything like specifically to respond to this? And we were like, so we like really quickly came together and developed this like fund to raise money for COVID relief for individual restaurant workers, who are facing crisis, to do other grants, and then also to do a loan program for small businesses that are like trying to. When we first thought of it, we were like, oh, in 6 months, everything's going to be back to normal and we'll just help restaurants rebuild. And now it's like, we're just going to help restaurants like die more slowly, so not to be bleak, but like, that's just, that's the industry. And it just really took off. And I think that the pandemic was like obviously super fucked up and I would never have wished it to happen, but it really was like a good proof for like what we were saying for years prior to that and what other organizations have been saying for even longer than that. So it really validated our kind of hypothesis essentially. And we've raised like $8 million since March of 2020.
$8 million.
Wow.
Ridiculous.
I remember, in the beginning.
Incredible.
Yeah. It was like one of those things where we like decided to have the fund. We like put the fund together, put up a webpage. Like we told like one person in the media.
Yeah.
And then like the next day it was like the classic like 240 text messages and like emails. Like,
I didn't because the reason that I wanted you on the podcast was to speak about your past and stuff like that. But I'm glad that we talked about this because I feel like all the stuff that you said about the Restaurant Workers Community Foundation is that like it are the things about you and your personality that I find so fascinating and interesting. And I want to touch on like just, we're going to get into our questions. I just want to touch on what you said right in the beginning where you were saying as a tall, white, we're going to say a little more than okay looking, like hot white person.
Thanks, Brian.
That's like, you know, tall and like, you know, when you walk in, you command attention,
6'2"
whether
or whatever,
you like it or not. You know what I mean? Because this is like right in America, and just recognizing the privilege that you have just by your appearance without people even knowing like your background. I feel like that's so interesting because for me, it's just something about you that I feel like a lot of white people have that privilege, but they can't like. They don't understand that, but you're like, duh, I can see that I'm obviously being treated way better than everyone else that works at this restaurant. And I feel like that's a very interesting thing about you.
Yeah. I mean, I remember a time when like, I was like kind of in my, like a teenager, and I was like, it was like, I knew what was going on in a way. I was like, oh, I'm like a decent looking, respectable guy, and I don't have like nice clothes and whatever, and I can just like walk into an office building and not get stopped by security, or I can just like walk out of a store and like not have anyone question what I'm doing or anything like that. And like I didn't put the pieces together that it was like strictly because I was white, you know. And it's more than just being white, obviously. I think it has to do with a lot, but it's like that's like 80% of it. And it's
80%. Yeah,
I think it's just a matter of like just like taking a second to look around and seeing what's happening to other people. Yeah. Not even really, you can examine yourself, and you definitely should, but just like getting out of your own kind of framework of your reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, John, I think it's so great that you started this initiative, and especially in a time like this. But I kind of want to dive a little bit into your past. So, to preface, Youngmi has...
police report? I'm just kidding, sorry.
No.
Youngmi intervention, surprise. You're all your friends. Just kidding.
Youngmi has wanted you on this podcast for a hot minute now. She's like, we got to have John on the podcast. I'm like, are we ready? Are we ready to have a non-Asian
Like secretly, I was
person?
also like, I want to be on the show, but I'm a white person. So I want to ask.
White
like,
pride. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. Delete that.
I'm not going to delete it. But
it goes on your Patreon.
But John, you know, Youngmi told me a little bit about you, and you are white, but you are tied to Asian culture through your family. And I was wondering if you could discuss a little bit about that.
Totally.
This podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who is your grandpa?
So my grandfather, so this is how it all started. So my grandfather, his name was like William Theodore deBary, and he was a professor at Columbia for like 70 years, like until the day he dropped out. He was like working. He was like 98. Yeah, like he drove in his like Honda Civic, like smoking like cigarettes. Like it was great.
Sounds like such a professor.
He was like Professor deBary. Awesome. Yeah, like it was wild. Like he wrote like 1 million books. Like I took one of his classes. Like he fell asleep during class. It was great. And so he really kind of like was one of the main people to establish the study of like East Asian like history in America, like in the West.
Wow.
And it became this way because he was studying Chinese language in college, and then I think I don't know if he was like drafted or enlisted. I don't know if they had the draft in World War II, but anyway, he was in like the army in like Iwo Jima, like World War II, like Pacific theater shit. And he was stationed in Japan after Japan's surrender, and he was like part of the occupation. And one of the first like writings that was, I don't know if it was the first that was published, but like one of the earliest writings was between him and his like army buddies talking about what was going on in Japan, and just like how completely fucked up the whole country was because the U.S. like bombed the shit out of it for years. Oh wow! And part of like the reconstruction essentially. Yeah. And he was brought to Japan because he knew Chinese, and he was translating like radio signals from Japan because they like were like, well, China, Japan, whatever, same difference.
Classic America. They're like, you know Chinese, right?
Pretty
Go
much,
to Japan.
yeah.
So funny.
So he figured it out eventually, and then he started to study like old like Japanese and Chinese and Korean texts, and was translating them and like bringing these like big compilations of writing about like Confucius and all these other like super like, classical East Asian texts, like in these massive compilations that are called like the sources of Japanese tradition. There's like the sources of Chinese tradition and sources of Korean. He's also done a few others for like India and stuff. But
wow.
Right.
And basically, it's like if you take a course on East Asian history in a university in the United States, like you're gonna read one of his books,
right?
Probably.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating.
So there's
incredible.
That. Yeah. And so like my grandparents, like my grandmother did like ikebana, like Japanese flower arranging. Like it was just always like really like woven into my life. Like we like took our shoes off when we came into the house.
Yeah, which John's really big on taking shoes off. Love. More than me. Like I'm
as everyone should be.
Except like Brian. Brian wears his shoes in the house. So me and Brian are like don't even care about the shoes. John gets like murderous.
Physical pain.
He will kick me in the
I'll
mouth.
just look.
Wow. Can I just ask really quick about your grandma really quick?
Yeah.
So did they live in Japan ever, or?
I don't know if they ever like lived in Japan for a long period of time. They had a house like in Tappan, New York, which is like in like Nyack, like kind of upstate, but like like an hour drive from here.
Yeah.
But like their house was like super like kind of had this like Japanese vibe going on. They
wow.
Had, like, I forget like the name of the really, really famous Japanese furniture maker.
Oh,
Noguchi?
Yes. Isamu Noguchi?
No, not Noguchi. It was something else. It'll come to me. Whatever.
Okay.
Like.
That's so interesting.
And I mean, they would go all the time. And my grandfather was like fluent in Japanese and Chinese and like probably Korean. And so it was always just like it was always just like a really big, I think like a lot of like people like have like a sort of like their like cultural heritage is a big part of their life, and usually it's because like where their literal family is from. Like most of my family is actually from like Germany and Austria, but like it was always like I was always aware of like Japanese culture and all this history, and it was always really cool to me. I think it was like, partially I feel like it's a little bit of like an Orientalism where it's like, wow, this is like the most foreign thing I could possibly think of, and I was really into like being different, and like I knew I was gay since I was like 4 years old. I was like, okay, how can I just like be like the weirdest person, and then that was like a way for me to like be as foreign and kind of like kooky as possible.
Be into Japan,
exactly,
and gay,
exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
I feel like a lot of white people have the same idea.
Yeah,
they're like, ooh, I'm into anime. I'm so kooky. I'm just
100%.
But then actually,
like if you knew me in like 8th grade, that's
wow.
Me,
But
in your grandfather's generation, like how did they take all of this? Like were they kind of like, all right, that's cool. You're like passionate about.
I guess
Japan.
It was just like really. Fun. It was really like it was actually just like really expected, honestly. Like my dad's older sister is a professor of Japanese literature at Cornell.
And
my dad was like a lawyer, but like it was just like really normal. And I studied East Asian history, in college. Like I went to Columbia, like thanks to.
Oh, you did?
Wow.
I didn't even know that. Nepotism. Thanks to nepotism. Woo!
I was just curious because, it's from a different time and a different generation. And it sounds like your family has a very academic background. So it didn't seem that odd. But I would figure, like, even today, if I decided to study, like, go to my parents, like, I'm going to study Arabic and devote my life to it. My parents, everyone in my family would be like, what? That's so random. Like,
but I mean, that's the opposite. Like, I was like when I was starting out as a bartender and I was like, beyond just like, oh, I'm like working at a bar. It's sort of like I became like my profession and what I was like gonna do. And I was like a bar director from a Mofuku. Like I was like a professional bartender. And I told my grandfather and he was like, oh, so I see you're putting your Columbia education to good use.
But it's interesting.
Like, goodbye. Yeah.
Fuck you. Go back to Japan. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Like go back to Japan. No, like, but that's so interesting because that's like what he did, right? Like, I don't know, maybe kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, going into academia was really encouraged in my family. And I thought I was going to do it too.
Yeah.
Like I thought I was going to like translate like Japanese academically.
Wow.
Like I thought about going to grad school in Hawaii and like,
Yeah.
And what are your feelings about all of it? Like, does it feel, do you know what I mean? Like, I know did something change for you? Like, because I feel like the narrative has sort of shifted, especially in recent times where people have become more aware of their position in their room. Like, you are a white person and you are studying like East Asian studies, like maybe when you were younger as a kid, it didn't even obviously it didn't seem strange at all because you come from a family where this is like the pedigree that you all carry. And then did you, was there like a shift like in your life where you were like, whoa, this could be odd or strange if like the optics of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's interesting because it's like, in a way, at going to a school like Columbia that's like very academic and kind of like it's like very kind of, I think like going to a high level university is like kind of isolating, even if you're in New York City. You know, it's just like a bubble intellectually, and it's like and even like at Columbia, there's like the Professor Saeed who like wrote the book about Orientalism. Like that was sort of like on the margins of my awareness in terms of like colonialism and like othering, you know, the East, and you know, making kind of like it's sort of like dehumanizing, you know, foreign cultures because they're like, ooh, they're different, but they're like worthy of study and they're like intrinsically fascinating. It's like that, like it's like a really, really fine line between like respect and genuine like intellectual interest and like fetishization. So it's like I think it was like both for me a lot. Yeah, for me definitely.
You think about, you're saying your grandpa, for him it was like all those things.
I don't know. It's hard. I never really like interrogated him about it, but I feel like it's hard to say because I feel like he's the kind of person who was like kind of shouting from the rooftops, like these people, like these people, like like there are like really, really, really useful concepts for how to live in society from these texts that most people in America just aren't looking at.
So he was like, you know, I feel like there are, especially in that era, there were a lot of white people that were like, hey, the East isn't barbaric. They have like, they're different, but they have different cultures, but like we could learn a lot from them. And it's like, there's an extension of that even in like my parents' generation, where my dad was kind of like that because he's a white guy that went to Korea and he came back. He's from Jersey City. And he went back to Jersey City and he was like, hey, it's better in Asia than Jersey City. And people in Jersey City were like, no, it's not. And he was like, like they have robots that do your laundry in Japan. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I feel like there's a lot of like white people back then in that older generation that were trying to convince white people so much like Asia is fucking cool. But then also it was bordering on fetishization. And they were like, the women there, you know, sexy. And then you're like, okay, sir. It started off good, then it got a little weird. But I feel like people recently maybe don't know that in your grandfather and then my father's generation, people were very committed to white supremacy and they just did not want to hear that Asians did anything better. And so I know a lot of like white men that are older that were like, no, it's better. They take off their shoes there and like trying to convince like white people to see them as equals or humans, I think. And do you feel like,
well, it's interesting because it's like the reason why my grandfather was exposed, I mean, he definitely was like studying like East Asia before World War II, but like he was immersed in World War II because he was like fighting Japanese people, like you know, like he was like running a POW camp, like that's crazy, like for the army. And then he was like helping like the Japanese government like form a democratic like system for like self-governance. And it's like, how do you separate like your kind of like wartime hostility mentality of like these people are the enemy to like, oh, these people are like my friends and like I'm equals with them. So it's like, how do you disentangle that?
It was like a intense time, man, in history. Shout out to your grandpa for not having that sounded, I'm not going to say that. Delete that. I was going to say something problematic.
For not having a Japanese wife.
I was like, wait, why doesn't he have a Japanese wife?
No,
I'm just like, I wonder why.
Okay, so this is like when my first year of Columbia, when I like first week of classes, I was like, I would like introduce myself and people would be like, oh shit, like I heard about you. Like you're like Professor deBary's grandson.
Yeah.
And they're like, why are you not like half Japanese?
Why aren't you Japanese? That's so funny.
And I'm like, my grandmother's Irish, like Catholic Irish. Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, you know, that's just interesting. I'm just
it
noting
is,
that.
yeah.
I'm just noted.
Noted.
What languages do you speak, John?
I used to be able to speak Japanese fluently. Like when I was living there.
Yeah.
I can still like pretty much understand it pretty well. It's just like I haven't spoken it in a long time, and I started studying Japanese by myself when I was 13. I started to translate Dragon Ball comics like by myself because I wanted to be able to buy Japanese video game systems and play the games earlier than when they came out in the United States. Like
that's so legit.
Was my motivation.
I wish I could do like I was.
I bought a Japanese Nintendo like GameCube and like played Super Mario Sunshine like in Japanese, and I was like,
that is
I'm
so
living
sick.
In the future.
I was like, I
That's
wanted
sick.
to do that so badly.
I went to Japanese camp in North Dakota when I was.
Whoa.
Hurt us like that, John. You did. Was everyone else Japanese?
No.
Oh, well. Okay, so I'm gonna insert my question now before I get more cringed out. Speaking of cringed out, okay, all these things that you're talking about, like obviously they're legitimate and like obviously no judgment, and like I've never cared about white people that are into Asian whatever, whether it's through your family or through their own like interests, but like all these things on I make fun of these things a lot, John, and like in my comedy,
like expat people who living in Asia are like scary, the
worst. If you've ever met like a white guy that's lived in Japan longer than a year, run for the hills. They are not well. They're unwell in the head, and that's a totally
and they don't speak Japanese.
And but you know this because you've been there. They're not okay. But this is my question. So all these things that I make fun of, I've never had an issue with you, John, as like you're one of my closest friends. I've never felt like you've ever said anything that was like made me like, ugh. You've never. There's not, and I'm very sensitive, as people know, to like microaggressions or when white people say weird things about Asia. I'm very, very sensitive to that, and I've known you for a long time now, and I've never felt that way about you. And so the reason why I wanted to have you on this episode was because like, we are Asian, but we live in this world with a lot of different people, a lot of people that are not Asian. And, there's this like question of allyship. And a lot of people do ask me about that online, like white people. Like I get these weird comments on TikTok, like, well, what do you want me to do then? Am I not supposed to like Japan, or am I supposed to like, how am I supposed to go to H Mart and everyone hates me when I go to H Mart? I'm like, that's
just don't be a dick at H Mart.
Exactly. Like what do you think, why, like I touched on this in the beginning about you like being in restaurant work and noticing your privilege and acting accordingly. Like what do you think has led you to be, I know this is a weird question, like why do you think you're not weird?
Well, I'm like, I am
weird in that way, like weird in a racist way. Like why are you not like that?
I don't know. I think I think my parents were really cool. That helps.
Mm-hmm.
But I also like, I don't know. It's like, it's hard for me to be like, thank you. Cause the bar is like so low. It's like the fact that I didn't say anything fucked up to you in the 2 years that I've known you, like, even
you weren't racist.
Yeah. It's like, is that the gold star?
That's
it's like kind of sad.
Yeah.
Right.
So like, there's that. But I think it's also, it's about growing up in like a really sheltered place. And like growing up in like this sort of like rarefied like Stepford wife, like Greenwich, like literally Greenwich, Connecticut, like yacht club, private school.
Yeah.
Like I honestly at one point when I was like probably 10, I wondered out loud to my mom like why airports have parking lots, because we just got drivers to the airport, and I was like, why are there parking lots here?
Okay, but you're saying that that's why you're cool.
So
but
I'm saying
those
like,
people are usually
you have
the
to
worst.
come from like it's like you have to sort of like, for me it's like about like looking back at all of that and being like, wow, like that was like so not normal, and like going from kind of like like I went to private school, I went to like a nice public school in Greenwich, like I went to Columbia, and then like I started like working in restaurants, like with like normal people who weren't from Greenwich and like living in New York City. And I don't know, maybe it's just like I got lucky, I guess. I don't even know like what to say, but like I think it just comes from like maybe being like really harshly critical of yourself all the time.
Do you think being gay has something to do with it?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it because you're like this. You weren't like every other Greenwich, Connecticut blonde.
But I was,
man,
except for like one thing.
Bloop,
yeah.
I'm gay.
Yeah.
And I always feel like that's like,
and it was never something that I realized. It wasn't like I was like, why am I fucked up? And then like when I was 19, I was like, oh shit. I was like literally thinking about like banging dudes when I was like 5 years old.
When you were 5, you were thinking about banging dudes?
Yeah.
Same.
So I had it never occurred to me that I wasn't gay, and so but then it's like I knew the threat to like safety and survival that being gay was. So it's like I think there's something about like, oh, if you look at someone the wrong way, like you don't know what could happen.
Yeah,
you know,
that's something that people of color understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think getting a taste of that also helps.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like being hyper vigilant all the time.
When you went in the restaurant with other people that were
not even maybe it was like I wasn't exposed to homophobia at the restaurant. It was like from day one, but like I think like having being able to relate on that level, like kind of like from a solidarity perspective, I think was really helpful. But also, I mean, I was like a white kid who grew up in Greenwich. Like I probably said a lot of really fucked up shit when I was
I'm sure
like
you did
13.
As did I.
I'm really glad that there wasn't like YouTube and social media back then.
I'm so glad there was no. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell I was saying when I was 12. It was probably racist, that's for sure.
Yeah. And that makes sense though. I think it's because you could have just as easily stuck into your insular bubble of like Greenwich, Connecticut, and then going to an Ivy League, and then surrounding yourselves with people who had the same experience as you. And I'm sure you would have ended up becoming a very different person than you are today if you if you just exposed yourself to that insular bubble and stuck with it. But I don't know. Let's like use an example. In this case, what we talked about earlier in the episode with like the white woman in Oregon who like wants to start she has a kanji company, and then that went viral. Like, what are the issues with that? Like, because everyone's like, it went viral, and obviously it like struck a chord with people as like, this is fucked up. She clearly could very much love kanji and just want to like spread the joy of it. Like, what is the issue with that? What is the issue with these YouTubers who go to Japan and I'm talking English, like I'm talking Japanese well? Why does that sit kind of unwell or feel weird?
I mean, my theory really quick is it's not even what they're doing. It's like they're telling you immediately their core belief that they're better than whatever the other thing is. And you can see it. Every little word that Karen wrote about her kanji company was laced with supremacy. And that's the issue. And like, that's it. You like, when I talk to John, he's like, oh, I know about Japan. But I just know about Japan. It's not like I understand. Like, it's not like talking about it condescendingly or whatever about China or Japan, which almost all white people do. And it's like they don't understand. It's like not even the choice of words. It's this, and you can deeply ingrain belief that they are superior to it. And there's no amount of PC language that they can use to cover that up. I mean, that's my like.
But I think I don't know. It's like, obviously, I don't think it's like easy just to like solve cultural appropriation and white supremacy in like one conversation. But like, it's like, again, I think the bar is like really low. Like it's not like white people can't do anything. It's just like, can you just like spend like 20 minutes just thinking about like how this fits within the context of like colonialism and white supremacy, and all the other kind of harmful structures in the world, and just do like a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't take a whole lot. Yeah, I think to just like overcome this like very kind of like uncritical, just like, oh, I'm gonna do this and it's just gonna be great, and I'm just like, this is awesome. Like, I wish I had more of that, because I feel like I'd probably like like be more confident in myself. But again, it's like the same thing where it's like maybe growing up gay and like being kind of like super critical of yourself, like is like kind of too. Like pay it off, like in a way.
Oh, that's a really good point. Just being like, your personality is like super critical. That
like if you think you're just a fucking asshole all the time, then like everything you do is like filtered through like this harsh lens of self-criticism.
Yeah, then you're very careful.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of people don't have that, and they're like, kanji sucks, I'm gonna make it better because I'm good at things. And you're like, like that's not the way to approach anything.
Right.
But
that's so true, Youngmi, because even the kanji thing in the mission statement of the company, I think she used the word elevate, like elevate kanji to the Western palate. Like elevate is a condescending. It's condescending verbiage. Like, because
I almost think she said palatable.
So many chefs use the word elevate. So many chefs use the word elevate. White chefs, just FYI.
Right. What's that code word for?
Yeah. Supremacy. But it's like when you approach somebody and be like, hey, your thought process is rooted in white supremacy, then they're like, what? And then they're so shocked. And I'm like, yeah.
How is that a surprise?
But they are, insane. Though. Karen was surprised. She was shocked. She was shooketh. Just like that teacher that cried, Mino's teacher, shooketh. And I was like, dude, let's all be okay with over the summer, I like posted something on Instagram and I was like, I don't know what this is about, this fennel candy that I think it's like a Middle Eastern thing. And I was like, what is this? And somebody got mad at me and they're like, that's really like racist and like offensive. And I was like, dude, you're totally right. Like, I'm like acting like, ew, what is this about another culture's very normal food? And like, I just did it this summer. It's not. And I was like, it came from a place where I was like, ew, what is it? Was like,
why is that? I'm sorry. Like, is that racist? Like, why is that racist? It's like, because you could, if you don't know,
disrespectful, I would say.
That's literally what the kid did to Mino. He said that looks like worms because he didn't know what it was.
Right.
Like,
I guess it's a tone thing.
That's exactly what I did. And I can sit here and be like, oh shit, that's like so culturally insensitive, at least, at worst, racist. You know what I mean? Like, and you know what? I'm not gonna cry about it. I'm just gonna be like, shit, I fucked up. I'm sorry. And I apologize to that person. I deleted the post. You know what I mean? Just like,
I guess it's the tonality and approach, because I don't want to live in a world where I'm too afraid to ask questions out of fear of scrutiny and being labeled a racist.
That's not what I'm saying.
There's a lot of shit I don't know, and I want to be able to be like, hey, I don't fucking know shit all about this. Teach me. Like, I want to learn more. You know?
Well, that's great. That's a great way to approach it. Not like me, where I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, that was fucked up. That was fucked up. You know, this is all about. We're turning this episode about me being a racist. Me. It was me. I fucked up.
Self-cancellation episode.
I'm canceling myself. I shouldn't have said that story. Why am I doing this? I got a white person on my Asian podcast. Now I'm canceling myself.
In any case, John, thank you for being our first non-Asian guest on the Feeling Asian podcast, because this could have very easily quickly become a baited Z-Way situation where we...
could you imagine?
What if we tricked you into coming and then I was like, why are you a racist? Who do you like better, Koreans or Japanese?
Name 5 Asian actors. Name 5
women.
Whoa, I can't do that. Sorry, I'm too gay. Young me, Mayor.
I'm too gay. Young me.
But thank you again for sharing your experience and being so vulnerable with us. But we'd like to leave you with a question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, what is something that you're proud of, John?
I was like listening to you be proud of like yourself earlier, and I'm like, what is that like?
I'm like, I envy. John is my friend.
I'm like, what is?
He might be white.
I'm so jealous.
But he's actually really Asian on the inside. He's like, wow, I've never been proud of myself, and I'm full of shame. That's why he's on this podcast, everyone. If you're wondering.
I recently started to do like cocktail videos for Food 52, and I've always kind of wanted to do video stuff, but like I suck at it personally. Like, my TikTok is like really embarrassing, and I don't do it anymore. But I got like hooked up with Food 52, and I'm like their drinks expert, you know. And so every month we do cocktail videos. Like, they come to the house. Like, we have a whole setup over here, and it's really fun. And we just did another like shoot on Monday, and so like I'm really, and like people, and we posted on YouTube, and people are really nice in the comments, which is like, I was not prepared for like people being like, wow, John, like you have nice legs, and nice thirst legs. Comments on YouTube,
thirst comments, wow,
that's amazing,
which I love. People are like, John can come to my house and make me a drink, and I'm like, is it like hot? And I'm like,
wow,
maybe I might.
YouTube star.
So
John
yeah,
deBary.
I guess I'm proud of like doing like videos and stuff now, because it's like I feel like it's the next kind of evolution of like my drink career, of like writing a book and like doing writing and like being in a bar first, and then like sort of evolving out of that. So I guess that's what I'm proud of right now.
Yeah, where can people find these videos? I think Brian.
Well, I actually just updated my personal website, johndeBary.com, JOHNDEBARY.com.
Okay.
And I think Food 52, you can find the videos. Yeah, they're pretty easy to find.
Nice.
My Instagram is JND3001. If you haven't seen, I mean, Yummy like tags me all the time.
But in the vein of these Food 52 cocktail videos, what is like a mistake that you see people commonly make when they're like mixing drinks at home?
I think it's not a technical mistake, but I think a lot of people, it's more about expectations and reality of their own capabilities and what you can and can't do at home. And for
reality of your capability, you're not good at
you have
this,
to be honest with yourself. It's just like, it's really hard. Like, making drinks is like usually done in like a very professional, like quote, like kind of clinical setting. There's like staff and there's a whole, like a bar. It's like designed and it's like this specialized tools. So I think people, they get like kind of hung up on this, like, oh, I'm going to recreate this drink that I had at like a fancy cocktail bar. Yeah. And it's like, it gets kind of like psychologically damaging when they don't do it, versus just sort of like having a kind of an expectation of like, these are like the at-home kinds of drinks I can make and being okay with that. So that to me is sort of like allowing yourself to like be okay with like what you can do in a certain setting. And that's like kind of what my book is all about, where it's like, hey, like if you're at the beach, like you can't make a daiquiri. Maybe you can, but like, you can't have like an elaborate, super
John
fancy cocktail. I mean, I can try, but I usually don't want to.
Lower your expectations.
Lowering your expectations. People's expectations are too high.
Nice. Roll with it.
Yeah. And then on the same token, I think a lot of people are very scared of like, I get a lot of questions. People are like, oh, John, like, is this okay if I do this and that? And I'm like, probably. Like, try it. Like,
I'm so the opposite. I'm like, we're putting
exactly. Yeah. So it's a lot of people are looking for permission. To do certain things like at home.
Oh, I'm
like,
100%.
Oh, hey, I have this bottle of whatever.
That's definitely.
Is it going to be good if I do this? And I'm like, I don't know. It could be. Just try it. Like,
I feel
whatever.
like I've asked you things.
Yeah,
like that,
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's like,
I'm
it's
like,
pretty common.
John, can I put? I was like, can I put cranberries inside? You're like,
sure.
I don't know. My biggest problem with making drinks at home, and I'm always just like putting 900 gallons of like tequila in it. I'm like, because it's better if it's strong, and then it tastes like shit. And I'm like, why does it taste like shit? And I'm like, well, it's because 90% tequila.
And like,
then I'm just wasted after a sip, and I'm like laying down. Well, it was so nice to have you, John. I'm so excited about your drink videos.
Yeah, thanks.
And again, your Instagram is
JND3001.
Nice.
My initials are John Nichols deBary.
Wow,
so
such a fancy name.
We didn't even talk about my family.
Oh my God! Next episode.
Yeah, next episode.
It's gonna be you moving forward.
It's just I'm taking
John
over.
deBary
I fully colonized Feeling Asian.
He's gonna he colonized the
Feeling Asian with John deBary.
Next week you're gonna Feeling Asian with John. You're gonna tune in next week and be like, "Hello, it's your host John deBary." Fuck the Patreon shoutouts. I'm going to talk about myself.
You're both like dead in the corner.
Dead in the corner.
Like tied up. Like
help us. Okay, Brian, where can our listeners find you on social media?
You guys can find me on socials at It's Brian Park. And what about you, Youngmi?
YM Mayer, and don't forget to follow our podcast at Feeling Asian Podcast on Instagram and on TikTok at Feeling Asian Podcast.
Yeah, and we're on YouTube too. If you want to see John in the flesh, you can do so at youtube.com/Feeling Asian Podcast.
Make sure he's white. Yeah.
Verify my whiteness.
But yeah, that's it, guys. Bye.
Bye.